G'day, it's Scotty from Zenium Real Wealth, and today is Thursday, one of the first Thursdays in December. So there you go. And we have a special guest with us today, Malcolm Coote. G'day, Malcolm. How you going?
Hey, Scott. Thanks for the invite, mate. Look forward to having a chat with you.
That's good. Well, look, today, being our special guest, we thought we'd do something topical. Now, look, it's going to cut out a good portion of the population in Australia, unfortunately. But the big news at the moment for us in our home state is that Queensland government is looking to review the rental tenancy laws, and it has made a big hoo-ha in both tenants and landlord land. And we're going to break that down today and have a look at what that means. So I thought it would be best to get Malcolm on. He's someone I've known for probably over a decade now, and he has, mate, you've just got a few rentals up there on the Sunshine Coast, don't you? Like 20 or 30 or something?
Yeah, we started with 20 or 30. We started with zero. So no, we're over 500 mark. So we've got a good captured audience to be able to answer some of your questions, mate. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, that's good. So when it comes to rentals, Malcolm does all our personal stuff and our company stuff. So we have known him for a while and we use his services. So I thought, look, let's get him on and we'll kick this off right away. So for those of you that might not know, now this is going to relate to, a big portion of our viewers because they're either landlords or tenants, right? So obviously, if you're just a homeowner with no investment property and you're not ever thinking about getting investment property, well, this isn't going to work for you. But for everyone else who is either a tenant or you're looking at buying a property or actually have a property, then this episode is very, very pertinent to you. And a big shout out to all those on our podcast who listen, and of course everyone who's on Facebook, LinkedIn and YouTube doing the same right now live. So let's add this in here, Malcolm. Let's see how we go. Okay. All right. So about 4 weeks ago, I think the government came out and said, right, we've done we're looking to do some changes to the rental rules, and here's our proposed changes. And the REIQ and a few others came out and said, whoa, hang on, tick, let's look at this in depth. And so the government has set up a website specifically outlining the changes, and that's what we're going to go through today. So this is their better renting website, renting in Queensland. So you can give your feedback straight there, and it talks about how they came to the process and all that sort of stuff. So there's a few points that we're going to cover here today, which is these 5. You can't quite see them on screen. So minimum housing standards, renting with pets, minor modifications, domestic and family violence, and ending tenancies fairly. So we'll just start at number 1. And what I'm going to do, Malcolm, I'm going to read through what their proposed changes are, and then I'll get you to jump in and, show how different it is, if it is, from what is currently the rules.
Yep.
So
and if it's pro tenant or pro landlord changes for sure.
Well, this is the thing, okay? So we're looking at the minimum housing standards here. Okay, so the proposed changes under this proposal, right? So some of this is not necessarily a bad thing. So some of it is going to be pretty clear cut what it is, right? So let's go through this. The proposed change, all rental properties in Queensland would need to meet certain standards. So that's waterproofing and structural soundness, plumbing and drainage, security, the standard of repair of fixtures and fittings, control of pests and vermin, ventilation, lighting and privacy, and cooking and food preparation facilities. I think we can probably all agree that in principle, that's pretty good, right? I mean, if you are paying 200, 400, 600, 700 a week, you'd probably want that sort of stuff sorted. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's quite fair.
Yeah. So the thing that gets me here is that I know this is just their brief rundown of how it works, but what does that mean? What does waterproofing and structural soundness mean? Because it could be really laxed, or it could be, your pergola let rain in on the side, so it's not suitable. Well, rain comes in through the side of pergola. So I think that's a little bit open, but it's probably, out of the 5 categories we're looking at today, probably one of the most rounded categories that are there. It also goes on to say that They're making changes, they're recommending changes to ensure that property owners and managers comply with the minimum housing standards. Okay, so this does relate to our landlords and, of course, directly to you, Malcolm, because you're not only just a landlord, you run a property management business. So enhanced QCAT repair orders, increase in the time allowed for a tenant to return a condition report. How long do they have right now to return a condition report, mate?
They got 3 days. So I'm actually for having, maybe up to 5 days, because if they take the keys on a Friday, 3 days later, so it's not business days, it's 3 days. So if they collect the keys at 12 o'clock, that's coming back, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, by 5 o'clock. And if you've got a busy weekend, you don't have time to run through a house. So we want it to be fair there, because we take ample photos. So we're happy for them to have a little bit of extra time.
Agreed. I think that they're looking at making it 7 calendar days, which would be like the 5 business days. So that's pretty right, I think. Increase in the value of emergency repairs that can be authorised by a tenant. Mate, how much can they do now?
No, but there is no set limit. So if it's an emergency repair, it's an emergency repair. Like you can't get a plumber to come out and say, we can only pay you $250 if it's a $500 job. So that's what baffled me in that sense. So, but our tradespeople, so let's say on the weekend we had a plumber call out. They call us first to say, hey, the tenant's called us. What do you want us to do? And then we know what's fair to the tenants and we know what's fair to the owners. So, I'm not too sure where that actually relates to. You're kind of giving a tenant an open checkbook, aren't you?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting point. So it goes through here. This is on each of these 5 topics, they've got a PDF download, which I've got up on the screen. And it breaks down what the security, like all the points that they're making, weatherproof and structural stability. So it's got to go to the Building Act, the Water Act, et cetera, planning schemes. So that's pretty much all right. Lighting's not covered. Adequate ventilation. Look, I think you've seen yourself that there's definitely some homes that could be better ventilated with mold and stuff. I mean, mold is a real issue. So absolutely. I think that's okay. And look, we don't really want tenants living with rat infestation either. I mean, that's completely unfair. Yeah, absolutely. If your stove doesn't work, I mean, that's not fair. You're paying for it. So there's a lot of stuff there. So, that flicks through. And look, all this is available for download for anyone who wants to have a look at it. There's more time. This is what we touched on here. The proposal allows for 7 days, which is what we just mentioned. The emergency repairs authorised by the tenant, based on average Queensland weekly rent, is $740. Right, so they're looking. The option would be to increase the amount tenants may authorise for emergency repairs, but as you said, that's a bit of a funny one, because if it's an emergency, it's emergency. So up to 4 weeks from the existing 2 weeks. And the next one is the property manager's responsibility, where it's proposed that they be authorised to consent to up to 4 weeks rent. Like, do you have any consents at the moment? Like on our joints, if there's something going on and you can't contact us, like, do you not get it repaired? Do you get it repaired? Like, what happens?
Well, it all comes down to what it is, and if it's an inconvenience to the tenant. So let's say if it's a backsliding door that's just hard to move, we'll always want written authorisation from our owner, because that isn't an emergency, but the tenant might say, look, it's an inconvenience to us, but we'll always wait for written consent. An oven, by all means, I mean, it's not an emergency, but it's certainly an appliance that tenants do need every day. So even though it's not an emergency like plumbing or electrical items are, that to me is certainly something that if we can't get in touch with an owner very quickly, that we would take that on the back of our own and get that replaced or repaired. It's just a bit of common sense. Tenants like to get things done straight away, and that's, look, I'm happy to do that within reason. If it's required. Most of our management agreements only have $250 without the owner's written consent. But I'll tell you, 99.8% of the time we want written consent, because it comes back and bites us. Yeah. So, emergency repairs of plumbing and electrical, they're the 2 main ones. Any hazardous that's going to be hazardous to the or dangerous to the tenant being electrical, and obviously plumbing items, damage to the property and also the tenant's belongings, both fall under emergency.
Of course.
Yeah, but there's interventions too. So after hours, if a plumber needs to head out there, they can kind of fix the issue or solve the leak and whatnot, and then come back during work hours to fix it, so it's not as expensive to the owner as well. So there's a few things that we can play with to help both the tenant and the owner out at the same time.
Okay, so this is probably a big one here. I reckon there's a couple of big topics in these 5, and this is one: renting with pets.
Yep.
So they go on to say that pets are an important part of life, etc., etc. So let's go to the proposed changes. The proposed reforms would require an owner to have reasonable grounds for refusing a tenant's request to keep a pet. Define reasonable grounds for an owner to refuse. Allow property owners to seek a QCAT order to exclude pets from a property for valid reasons. Allow pet bonds to be paid to cover the cost of pest control at the end of a tenancy.
Well, pet bonds were in play. Look, I don't know. They've probably been out of play for about 5 or 6 years now. So I think that's a great introduction. Victoria brought in some very similar laws, and I always said to all of our owners, we're going to be following suits with the renting with pets. So they're kind of classifying pets as being like children, and some pets are like children to some owners as well.
Yeah.
I've got no problems with pets being in properties because pets aren't the issue, it's the owner. So if the owners don't look after a pet, it falls back on the owner. But also, if the owners don't have a pet, if they're when I say the owner, the tenant, if the tenant without a pet doesn't mean that they're going to be any better than someone with a pet. So
Sure.
they all get done on face value, but a lot of people don't like cats. Look, I'm allergic to cats, so I prefer, if I'm moving back into my property, I don't want a cat there as well. So there's some health reasons too why people don't want pets there, and cats can cause a little bit more damage, with ripping up carpet and door jambs and scratching door jambs and window sills as such. So
yeah,
it's going to be a hard one.
Yeah, it is, because it's like, well, how much pet bond is? I mean, they'll probably talk about it in the download. I think they did. How much is suitable to keep as a pet bond? Is it going to be enough to cover damage? The simple fact is, even a normal bond isn't enough to cover damage for tenants, right?
So you got 4 weeks bond. Yeah. So I think in the past it was a 2-week bond, pet bond, as such. So that just pushes up the. So we're holding 6 weeks bond, which I'm all for. I'm all for that. I know it's tough for some tenants to come up with 6 weeks bond, but if they have it the first time, then it carries over. But there's got to be some kind of saving grace to the owner, and we can't always think that if the tenants can't afford 6 weeks, that then the owner becomes the copping field of if there is any extra damage above that. It's going to be interesting then to see how landlord's insurance comes.
That was my next question, mate, because obviously that covers for that sort of wacky damage you get from like someone going through with a wrecking ball. Does it cover pets?
Yeah, of course it does. It covers damage. So whenever you do a claim, so out of the bond, the rental, or if there's loss of rent, it's always the last thing that's covered. So the damage is the first thing that the landlord's insurance covers. The bond covers, and then the landlord's insurance will cover anything above that for damage, and then your 6 weeks. Most landlords' insurance covers are up to 6 weeks. Terry Shear have gone up to 14 weeks. I believe it's 14 or 16 weeks now. So Terry Shear are definitely got the best coverage out in the marketplace from what I've seen.
So here's your reasonable grounds for refusing a pet. It sort of relates to. It really doesn't mean that you just don't want a pet. It all has to do with the property. So the property doesn't have proper fencing, or the property doesn't have an area of protection, or the property is not allowed to have it because it's a body corp, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
So, or it could be a health risk because it's a snake or something. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
But
a lot of those.
Hang on, mate. We've lost you. You must have fallen out of your headphones.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, yep.
So with the terrace homes, there's a lot of terrace homes being built. So they're not really geared up for German Shepherds and those larger dogs. So that's good that they've got a bit of a summary there in regards to those properties that are more suited to having a larger pet than a smaller pet as well.
Yeah, and here's the separate bond. The proposed maximum pet bonds allowable would be $250 for a general tenancy, or $125. So it's not huge.
It's not huge, but that look, most of the time that's just door jams, a little bit of carpet
Agreed.
compensation if it's with a cat or lawn damage. If it's a dog, they run around that same spot.
Yeah, and I think what it does is that it provides that buy-in. Hey, we want to have a pet, and we're willing to pay the pet
Yep.
bond. Like it already shows the quality of the potential quality of the tenant and who
I
you've
agree.
got that rental relationship and that partnership with. So, I'm not so sure it's such a bad thing. I mean, there's a lot of negative. Look, anytime something comes out that's different, everyone goes, "Oh, the world's ending." Look, there's some interesting stuff in here, but we're just going to hit the key points today. All right, so let's.
The other thing with that, though, Scott, too, is it might make tenants a bit more mindful of buying or purchasing a pet 2 weeks before they become a tenant, which will be good as well.
Agreed.
Oh,
All
we
right,
see it all the time.
Yeah, I bet. We've jumped to the minor modifications section here. So the minor modifications requiring no approval would be health and safety modifications, accessibility modifications, security modifications, and to provide basic telecommunications. And then fast tracked would be modifications to personalise or improve the premises, energy and water efficiency modifications, and connection of non-essential communication services. So my understanding is that this is the tenant's ability to alter their rented home. So this isn't incurring a cost for the landlord.
Okay.
So there was a lot of hoo-ha about this as well that I read in the forums and the articles and what have you.
It's a tough one.
And yes, it is hard because it also goes on to say that they can put pictures up and bits and pieces in some. I think it says that in this article here.
Yeah, that's
minor
been the talk.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. But there's a lot of things like we had a tenant once that's I think they wanted to put a couple of ceiling fans in, right? And they were in. We had ceiling fans in everywhere except to these two areas. So they were in the bedrooms. This was the other area, and it had ducted air. But they didn't want to use the ducted air all the time. And I said, oh, look, it's we've already got them in the bedrooms and what have you. Oh no, we'll put them up. We'll get it licensed Sparky to do it. We're happy. We just want airflow. We don't have to use the aircon to save our power bill. Well, why would I deny that if they're getting a Sparky to do it, right? And it's done a good job and it's improving the value of our house and it's improving their livability. Is that not a win-win?
No, it's definitely a win-win, and they're also improving your ducted air system, so it's not being run as much. Yeah,
absolutely. So it's about communication, and it's unfortunate that this legislation always is about any legislation is really trying to define what we sometimes really sorted out over a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And so this is the minor modifications they're talking about: small shelves, picture hooks, planting and maintaining a garden. I guess as long as it's not a garden in your roof, right? Installing curtains or blinds. Curtains or blinds, I'm in two minds about that. Firstly, I'm not saying that's a minor modification. I don't agree that's a minor modification. Secondly, I think that depending where we're talking about, that should be mandatory in bedrooms and stuff anyway. Like who doesn't have that? So I question that one. Grab rails, well, if that's needed for safety and security, interesting. Pay TV. I mean, does anyone ever? I mean, I guess there's landlords that say no to that, but whatever.
There's no reason to say no, is there? So
no.
For it to come in, there must be a few complaints from tenants. So that just means that landlords just need to have a bit of a consideration. Think about if they were a tenant.
Yeah. Painting a feature wall. This is one that should definitely be removed. I don't care what this legislation is about. Feature walls went out in the 90s, and there is no way that legislation in the 2020s should have painting a feature wall in it.
Well, what's a feature wall? Like if it's a white home, putting something purple in, red in, so there's no limitations there, which,
look, I think minor modification to me is fixing up where your cat's scratched, painting a whole wall. I'm not saying it's not a minor job, but depending on the colour can completely change. And what does that mean? If they don't need approval for that, do they have to put it back to white or the sixth shade of beige when they leave, or what is it?
And where's the feature wall? A feature room in every room? Like one feature room per dwelling?
Yeah, so that's interesting. Poses some questions on that one. All right, our next section is Actually, we
Okay.
might come back to that one, because that one has some good points about it. Let's go to this one, which is the one where I reckon most
Yep.
of the whinging I've seen online is about. Okay,
Of course.
ending tenancies fairly. So the proposed changes say that owners would no longer be able to end a tenancy without a valid reason. The list of reasons that an owner can provide would be extended and enhanced. Tenants would also have additional grounds to end a tenancy. So I read this very much in that owners are having options reduced and tenants are having options increased. So let's go and see what the actual doc says. That's the summary we heard through problem identification. Okay, so we get to the table down here. So this one was really interesting. So it said that 68% of participants in a survey believe that notice periods should be the same for both parties.
100%.
That's interesting.
Yep.
Now, currently, Malcolm, they're not. Do you want to explain the notice period? So we've had it, say I've rented a property for 12 months, it's come to the end of the lease, and I'm not really going anywhere. The owner's happy for me to be there, but then in a few months' time, I've decided I want to leave. What do I do?
Yeah. So let's say your 15th of January, it's the 1st of January, and your lease expires on the 15th of January, and no notice period's been handed out from the property manager through to the tenant. So on the 1st of January, the tenant just needs to give 2 weeks notice, and they can be moving out on the 15th.
Right.
However, the owner still needs to give 2 months notice as of the 1st of January to the tenant. So at any stage throughout that 2-month period, that notice period from the owner, the tenant only needs to give 2 weeks. So it's heavily in favour of the tenant. The only time that changes is if the property is for sale and it gets sold. The notice period is only 30 days or 1 month to the
Right.
to the tenant. Yeah. So it's heavily in that favour of the tenant can get out quickly, where the owner, and traditionally when you put your property on the market for rent, you want 6 to 8 weeks to try and source a tenant. So if a tenant just gives you 2 weeks notice,
It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the part that probably got people a bit scared, and probably including myself, is that they threw other states' rules in here. You can read that okay, or do I need to make it a bit bigger?
Just one or two bigger would be awesome.
Yep. So let's see.
Hey, that's it. That's perfect.
Yep. Okay, so ACT requires 26 weeks notice for without grounds.
Wow.
In Tassie, it's only 42 days. And Victoria, property owners will no longer be able to end tenancies without grounds. Okay?
Everything started in Victoria too, Scott. So the pet started in Victoria. So everything that they approve, like, I just think it's gospel that it'll end up doing the rounds through all the other states.
Well, if they're looking at Victoria, that's not a great look. What's coming our way in Queensland?
No.
Okay, so here's their options. They went through here. So this is just their thought process of what they're looking to do. Status quo just means keeping it the same. Undertake an education awareness program to help people understand what the terms are. Remove ability for all parties to end tenancy. So these are the options they're working through, right? This is what they want the feedback on. So remove the ability for all parties to end a tenancy without grounds. Okay,
so if we just go to that one though.
Yep.
So a tenant, so if they don't have grounds, I mean, they just want to move. It's no different to the owner. I mean, that's I don't understand why they would ability, because we don't need grounds. Like, tenant. So if they just want to move to another area or the house in the next street, I mean, is that going to be sufficient grounds?
That's a good question, and so I don't think you can do. I mean, you have to give people. You can't have them locked in, tenant or owner.
Or owner. Exactly. Things change. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this remove the ability for only property owners and managers to end tenancy without grounds. So this would be completely weighted in the favour of the tenant. I love the shake of the head there you've got. Tenants would retain the ability to end tenancy agreements without grounds in that option. And require property, this is option 5, require property owners and managers to only end tenancy agreements for approved reasons. Okay. So that would mean that tenants could do anything and owners would have to give you an approved reason, which I'm guessing that they would make up whatever the approved reason is. So here we go here. Owner of the immediate family needs to move into the rental property. This was a good one, right? This was. Can I highlight this? Owners would be required to provide a stat deck to support their need to regain possession of their rental property. That's good, that one, isn't it? It's awesome. Thank you, government. I need a stat deck to say that I want to get back into my own rental property.
So it's just going to cost more money and more time, yeah.
They're trying. I guess what I can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to maintain the seriousness of someone's got a rental property. They have that rent. They are to use the property. That's fine. My argument here is, and you can weigh in on this one especially, is that as an owner, if the tenant hasn't defaulted on rent, or there's no breaches or whatever, why? Unless I was moving in, right?
Why
or
would I
unless
want to
someone, why would I want to get rid of the tenant?
And then pay another, lease fee and so forth.
So
yeah.
Do you have owners that just like kicking tenants out for the sake of it?
No. I mean, look, I'm assuming when an owner and a tenant butt head over a few things in the past, that the owner just needs to give themselves a bit of a slap over the face and really just say, look, this is a business decision. Are we prepared to keep this tenant in here? Let bygones be bygones as such. But no, we don't, because we really have that deep down chat, because you're going to have a vacant period for a couple of days, vacant property for a couple of days at least between tenancies, and then 1 week's rent plus GST to source that tenant.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't. To me, it seems like, from my experience, they're making a lot out of something that I don't think should be a lot, because I wouldn't be getting rid of a good tenant.
No, exactly. What's that 5.3, end of a fixed term? I mean, that's...
Yep.
The end of a fixed term agreement is not currently an approved reason. Okay, so it's not even an approved reason to end a tenancy, just because of...
Correct. And see here, they've done exactly what you said. They've highlighted Victoria. So they've referred to Victoria in that it only allows the end of a fixed term agreement to be used at the end of the fixed term tenancy, but not subsequent terms. Okay. That's a bit bizarre. I don't understand the logic behind that, but anyway. And the owner would need to disclose the intention to end the tenancy at the end of the fixed term when advertising.
So what that just means, if you've got a tenant in there at the end of their, let's say, 12-month term, if they sign up for another 12-month term, this means that you can't that only allow end of a fixed term ground. So realistically, after that first term, it goes into a different way of ending that agreement, as opposed to... I
thought about this, right? And what it would be is, I've rented the property to someone for 12 months and then I've done another lease for another 12 months. The legislation is taking the assumption that they were obviously a good tenant. I was happy with them. So then I'm removing my rights to have exit them under no grounds at the end of the next fixed term tenancy. Two things with that: possibly an assumption, or highly likely an assumption, but it could be accurate. So yes, if we're willing to redo a tenancy agreement, another lease, we're probably happy with that tenant, right? The problem is that if owners catch onto this and that does get through, and owners say, well, the only way I continue to have my rights is to get a tenant out after the first tenancy, then all of a sudden those good tenants who might be there for 2 to 3 to 5 years until you do want to move back in or another reason, right? They're probably going to those type of owners are going to say, well, we're going to cycle our tenants every 12 months, because then we've always got the option to get rid of them. So it's not actually helping the tenants at all.
There'll be a few things. So there's costs, when an owner doesn't renew someone, a newer tenant, it's obviously for a reason, because it's going to cost them money. It also costs the tenants money with bond cleans and removalist costs and so forth. So if both tenants and owners, really have a hard think about it, there shouldn't be any need if an owner, if a landlord has that property long term. The other thing though too, just in regards to what you said, the breach notices will start to come into effect now. So then when you do end a tenancy, you can say, well, look, you did get a breach notice. So some of our owners, if it's a minor discrepancy, we'll say to them, hey, we'll just give them a written notice. It might not be worthy of a breach, but I tell you what, more breach notices are going to be handed out. So that's going to be owners' excuses of being able to get rid of tenants. So it's forcing breach notice to be put on from tenant.
I agree, mate.
References.
I'm not. besides the whole limiting the owners, I think it's confining, it's forcing situations on tenants that
Mm.
are otherwise decent tenants that are just living their life and doing what they normally do in a house and mostly being awesome people, right?
Yep.
To having a whole bunch of legislative controls over them forced through an indirect effect from the owner.
Yeah, yeah.
I
And
can't see it being great.
I don't think tenants are really looking at it 100% of these proposed changes, because we're trying to find the fors and against both changes for both sides, where
Yeah.
tenants just want a lot more changes, owners want a lot more changes, but kind of they come with a bit of negative territory as well.
Everything has a cost,
Yep.
So, look,
Yeah.
this is the last section before we're going to knock off for the day. But domestic and family violence, they want to strengthen the tenancy laws to include additional protections that help tenants experiencing domestic and family violence to stay or leave their current rental property. They're recommending changes to ensure that the tenants experiencing domestic or family violence can enter tenancy without the usual notice requirements and can easily access rental bond funds. How does that change to what's there now? Is there
Look, I
anything there
don't.
now?
No, I don't think it changes much at all. I mean, if you ever held a tenant who was going through a DVO out on them, the courts, the QCAT will throw it out so fast, and it's not even worth us going down that path. So we educate our owners. I'm not too sure about the landlord's insurance, how you're covered with the DVO that comes out. But I mean, no owner of ours, and we've had maybe 3 to 5 of them over a 6-year period. So they're not often, but most of our owners are very compassionate because no one wants to be in that situation anyway. So
Yeah.
I don't think it changes. There's much change there at all.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, mate, that's good. And look, I know I jokingly said about gardens in the roof, but we're going to end on a bit of a funny topic. Have you ever had a garden in the roof that you've had to deal with?
Oh, look, we've had our fair share of drug labs and so forth within properties. Probably the one I'd like to share, and I won't mention too much about it, but they, at the end of it, it was about a $36,000 or $38,000 revamp to their property, afterwards, and they probably had an uplift of about $45 a week in rent after the revamp was done with the kitchens and new freshly painted and new flooring. So yes, sure, no one wants that, but if you've got the appropriate landlord's insurance cover, again, not everything is a negative. That's why it's we strongly suggest people get the best landlords coverage. So if something does happen at your property, we can kind of just run with it. And it's an easy process.
Yeah. No, that's good, mate.
But there's a lot more meth labs are starting to pop themselves up, unfortunately. So you need to have that coverage that certainly covers that. And I certainly believe that maybe not in 2020, but in the next few years, landlords insurance the premiums for meth labs will increase quite dramatically from where they are now.
Well, we had our building inspector, Ross McKay, on last week, and he touched on the meth lab stuff. He's working with a company there at the moment doing the stuff, testing the walls and things like that.
Okay, the screening, yeah.
Yeah, and he said he's already been called to 1 or 2, I think he said, and he's planning on next year. There's going to be quite a few he's going to. So maybe he knows something about the underworld of the Sunshine Coast that the rest of us don't. But it is happening, mate.
Yep, it sure is. Yeah. So again, you have the right property manager, the right landlord's insurance cover, and you're just covering yourself for those little items that can rear themselves. Not on a majority basis, but you don't want to be left without not being able to rent your property out, because those coverages cover you for up to 52 weeks loss of rent without if works are being done to your property, like for a meth lab, the cleaning and the renovations.
Yeah, all right, that's good. Well, mate, look, thank you very much for your
You're
time.
welcome.
This was Scotty and Malcolm Coote today talking about the proposed rental law changes in Queensland. It's been a very interesting discussion, and mate, I do appreciate your insights there, and the fact that you're a very busy man. I can never get a hold of you, but you've given me the time to see me on the screen. It's awesome.
Yep, I nearly ran late, mate. So no, likewise, mate. Thanks for your time.
That's good. Well, look, if you've got any questions about anything in this show or any other questions that you want us to cover, feel free to hit us up at hello@xenium.property. So that's hello@xenium.property. No .coms, no .aus, because we are global. And the other thing you want to do is jump on and join our Xenium program, where you get notified of all these lives, a whole bunch of other backlog of information and vaults videos that you can watch, and our weekly emails and things like that. And you go to www.xenium, that's XENIUM, so xenium.property/join. All right, Malcolm, thank you once again for joining us. And I'm Scotty from Xenium Real Wealth. And that's it for today. Till next time, be good.